Oh, I died. Hello, Dylan from Throttle Company here in Columbus, Ohio. This is February 1st. We got a nice weather day, so we're out test riding. You can see the snow is still there, but it's like 40, 45, I think was the high today, maybe 48. I don't know, it feels great. Good to be on a bike. Throttle Company Vintage Motorcycles here in Columbus, Ohio. And we are test riding a 78 CB550F, which is a super sport. So the 4-in-1. Some people think this is the best looking exhaust of all time. I'm not going to argue. It's between this and maybe the 400F, so the slightly smaller engine, but it shares a lot of similarities with this one. But this is just a gorgeous motorcycle. This motorcycle is for sale. I've got a guy who's very interested, a friend of ours, friend of the shop, and so it might be sold by the time you see this or find out about it and are interested in it. But we just got back from the Mecum auctions. A bike that was very similar to this was the orange one, so the generation before this, so it's all solid orange, not quite as nice as this one, sold for $13,000. so I guess logic says this is worth $13,000. Ooh, I should probably put a license plate on here before we go riding, but now let's just go without it. I can't make you guys wait. So anyway, 550. I have another video on a 76 550K, very similar layout. I just got off a minute ago for me, but maybe a week in between when I post this video, but a 500. Very similar motorcycles. Disc rake up front, drum in the rear. 4-in-4 is the stock on the K models or the base models, and then the Super Sport, which actually the only hint that you get here is Super Sport there. And some people call it all of them the 550Fs. I'm constantly annoyed by that, but when you're looking for parts or you're looking for this bike specifically, it's a 550F and it's that 4-in-1 exhaust. We'll take it around the loop, but this had 3,000 miles. This bike runs amazing, or at least it has here in the shop. So let's take it out and see how it goes. I mean, it just starts right up. I kind of want to give you well, we'll do it at a light or something when we get out there. I was going to say I want to give you the noise or the sound of it. 3584 is the mileage. Now the Super Sport has pegs that are back a little bit, which is really comfortable. The bars are a little lower than the stock bike, and then the one I just rode, which is over there in the corner. I don't know if you got a good glimpse of it, but I just did a video on it. And so those bars were more back towards me, more cruiser style, and this is Super Sport, so it's sportier. And it pulls awesome. This bike is just, I mean, this is essentially how it came off the showroom floor. I want to get the oil flowing a little bit before I really rev it up for you. But this bike feels tight. It feels dialed in. It feels awesome. It runs perfectly. They're very quiet bikes. You know, this is the 70s. Honda was you meet the nicest people on a Honda. This was a very kind of stately gentleman's bike. This was not the ruckus causing hooligan bike that you might be familiar with, you know, motorcyclists and biker gangs and stuff. They weren't riding Honda 554s. So the 4-cylinder engine is always very smooth. Here we go. So you can hear it, but it doesn't create a bunch of vibration for me. It's a small vibration. And it's really the predecessor to modern sport bikes. You know, most modern like sport bikes, full on GSXRs and the R1s, are 4-cylinder, inline 4 cylinders, which is what this one was, and it's really early on in the life cycle of those motorcycles. This guy just came right into my lane. I'm gonna give this guy a wave. So I don't know if you can hear the beep, beep, beep. That was a safety feature at the time. I'm gonna have to honk my horn at people. It's getting treacherous. Anyway, safety feature at the time to let you know that your turn signal was still on. So that's what we're hearing. And I haven't disconnected this. Normally I disconnect these. This one's just so original. I hadn't gotten around to doing it yet or anything like that. But normally I disconnect and people hate them. You can hear it. And actually it's under here, the beeper. I can kind of see it through there, but maybe you can't see it. There's a little speaker that just makes a beep that's just in line with the turn signal. So every time your turn signal's on, you get a beep noise. And so it's safety, I get it. If I think I have a right turn signal on and the guy who's getting ready to go in front of me thinks I'm turning and I don't realize I've still got that turn signal on, then he might pull out in front of me and I just have no way of, you know, being ready for that kind of thing. So I get the safety of it, but people will sometimes ask, you know, what's going on? They're making this horrible noise, or sometimes the turn signals don't work, but the bike's been left on for like 20 years or whatever, and it's been left with the turn signal on, and so you go to turn the key and it starts making this horrible noise. Just, what's wrong with it? But that was how they were in the 70s, mid to late 70s. They did a lot of safety stuff. They made it so, actually this is a European model, but you can actually turn the headlights off, but normally after 76 you can't turn the headlights off at all. Oh, I died. Ran out of gas. This guy couldn't wait for me to get going. Okay, so I had it on regular. I've now got it on reserve. Hopefully we've got enough gas to get back to the shop. I'm not gonna stop and put gas in it. You just saw me just pass the gas station, because a bike like this that's never had, well, as far as I know, ethanol fuel in it, I'm not gonna put ethanol fuel in this thing. It deserves better. In all my vintage bikes, so that's what we keep in the shop, and everything with a carburetor, I would really recommend, if you can help it, not putting in ethanol fuel. So modern fuels are called E5, E10, sometimes E15, and that's the amount of ethanol or alcohol essentially derived from corn that they have in it. And I actually think it's a horrible idea. There's some politics behind it, but essentially, in my view, America was just paying people to make corn. That's a whole other issue. But basically, everyone was geared up to make corn. They paid a bunch of farmers to just keep making corn, even though they didn't know what to do with it. It was more than we could eat. And so they were like, well, what else can we do with it? Well, we could make alcohol with it, and that could be used as fuel. And they said, well, great idea. And they didn't really realize that there are a lot of other effects from that they didn't consider. So essentially, this bike, you know, 1978, this bike was made, that kind of fuel wasn't even an option. So it doesn't like it. It will really mess up your carburetor. Essentially, the major reason is it is hydrophilic, as in it attracts water. It even attracts moisture out of the air. So if it's ever exposed to air, which of course is hard to stop, it's going to attract water. It's going to get in your carbs. It's going to cause corrosion. It's going to get in your gas tank, cause corrosion. If it sits any amount of time, you're just going to have a major buildup in your carburetors, which you can't have. Gums them all up. So anyway, that's why I skipped the gas station. If I run out of fuel, now at least you know what I was thinking. But anyway, this thing pulls amazing. The brakes are great. I can't believe how nice this motorcycle is. I mean, it's essentially fresh off the showroom floor. This is one of the nicest 550s I've ever ridden. Lots of power, very smooth. Sounds just perfect. We got up to 60 miles an hour there for a second. on this short little straightaway. So this is a fun little bike. I mean, you're not going to get into any trouble, I don't think. You obviously can break the speed limit, but you can't. You're not going to go 150. You know, that's just not possible. So this is a very cool vintage bike, and this is a time machine. This bike has 3,000 miles on it. I mean, and look at those gauges. Everything's just perfect. The paint on this thing is just perfect. We're transported back in time. Let's do it. This is we just bought this bike, 1978. We're gonna try to avoid this water, but this is what we would have done on our first time out, taking the bike to the limits and seeing what it had. Plenty more power, plenty more pull. I don't even know what gear I'm in. I think 4th. I think that was 4th, and this is now 5th. We got 5 total gears. Still pulling strong. I'm going to try to avoid this water if possible. I don't think it's possible here. We got too much of it. I've been kind of avoiding it all day, but it looks like they've just kind of drug it out. So let's get going slower and safer. This is one of the main disadvantages if you don't live in a wintry climate, that the first day that it gets nice is great, and the roads are usually dry. I mean, you can see the other side there, but then you get these big snowed piles that wind up melting, and then they'll put some water on the road, and if the temperature drops, that can turn back to ice. But there's no danger of that right now, but maybe tonight, you know what I mean? So that is what people typically refer to as black ice, where the road is black, but it actually is ice, and it's very hard to see, and it can be very dangerous if you don't know about this and you don't live in a snowy area where they would potentially have that. This truck's gonna hate me. Thank you, friend. I'm gonna try to give him a wave. This thing is awesome. When I first got this thing running, you know, my dad, he loves vintage bikes. He owns the shop with me, so it's me, my dad, and then Nicole, who is my life partner, business partner, and she runs the office, essentially a part of this, and all the social media. She's a photographer, a professional photographer, so she does that end of it, the creative end of it, and she does videos as well. Her name is Road Warrior Moto. But anyway, my dad is the third owner of this business, Throttle Company, and he's always on the lookout for vintage bikes, and he likes them like this, shiny, original, low miles. Who doesn't, right? And when I first got this started up, he was in the shop, and I said, come take a look at this, come listen to this thing. And he said, well, I gotta buy this thing, right? I was like, well, I don't know, let me ride it first. So he was chomping at the bit to try to get this thing. I don't know if he will. We had another guy that, like I said earlier, that was interested in this, and then we saw one, like I said, in Mecum recently, go for $13,000, and I think this is as nice, if not nicer. I like the color better, let's just say that. And same amount of miles, essentially, that had like 2 or 2,500. So I mean, anything under 5 is like, come on, it's serious. So the price is going up on these. The secret's out. I think people are starting to realize the CB550's prices have been just going through the roof, and they continued that trend this year. And the 550s, I think, are kind of picking back up, or filling that void behind, because people are saying, well, if I can't afford $20,000 for a CB550, maybe I could spend 10 on a 550. And like I said, and arguably a nicer motorcycle, depending on what you're trying to do with it. This, hard to argue against. I mean, this is an awesome motorcycle. It just rides so well. The riding position is just as aggressive as you'd want without having clip-ons, or, you know, getting into full-on kind of racy cafe stance. The clutch works so well. The brakes work great for how big the bike is. It stops really quick. It's got power. It's higher in the RPMs. I think that's basically the design of the engine. You know, less cylinders. It's going to have more grunt, more cylinders spread out on over 500 cc's. Each cylinder is just going to have more horsepower in the top end rather than low end torque. So you can kind of feel it really come alive here at 5,000, 6,000. But everything works on this, including the original beeper. These are great motorcycles. This is the last year. So this is the last. That car was so loud I couldn't figure out what's happening. This is the last generation of CB550. After that, they go to the 550 becomes the 650, which is still a single overhead cam. In my mind, a horrible motorcycle compared to the 550. I just don't think it's good at all. The ones that I've worked on have been nothing but a pain. They just were getting too complicated and they had too many emissions concerns to deal with. And then the 750 became a dual overhead cam 750. I don't like those nearly as much, and I'm not in the minority here because that's what everybody thinks when it comes to the auction prices and all that stuff. Nobody wants the dual overhead cam 750s, not nearly as much. They're about half, if not less, of the value. So we'll pull up next to this 500 that I just did a video on, but if you're watching this, turn off my beeper. If you're watching this, you're going to like that video if you liked this one. I don't know if you did like this one, but I appreciate you watching nonetheless. So there's what a not stock 500 looks like. Essentially the same engine as this, minus a little bit of slightly larger cylinders. 50cc total. So anyway, this has been an absolute pleasure. I hope you enjoyed it nearly as much as I did, because I don't think you could have possibly enjoyed it as much as I did. This is an excellent motorcycle. If you have the option to ride a 550 or a 500, just take it, because it's an absolute pleasure. It's a total joy. I think you can hear on video, but that truck is making all kinds of noise. For a second I thought it was this bike, but this bike is quiet here. You can hear that smooth quietness. I just turned down the idle. That's what happens on an old bike with a carburetor. It just warms up, it starts using the fuel more efficiently, and you wind up just having to bump the idle down more and more as you go, as it warms up. But this is the maiden voyage for this. I have not been on the road before this, so I appreciate you coming along with me on this ride around the loop, in the loop, and I will see you next time.